Recently there's been a lot of talk all across social media, Twitter, Threads, TikTok, all about a particular celebrity and them talking about boundaries in their personal relationships. Now, boundaries are never about trying to control another person. Boundaries are personal and personal to you. And then boundaries in your work relationships are just as important and can be even more complex, but it all starts with an understanding of your own needs and your own limits.
I'm Tara Collison. I'm an executive coach, and I work with leaders, helping them explore and express their highest potential in their leadership.
And I'm Deborah Holstein. I've got over 15 years hands-on experience leading high-performing teams. Tara and I share pragmatic, on-the-ground advice, tools, and frameworks to address some of the most pressing problems you're going to face every day as a leader.
So, Deborah, I love what you said about boundaries not being a mechanism to control other people. Really, boundaries are about you. They're those invisible lines that we draw around ourselves so that we can make sure our needs are met emotionally, physically, psychologically, in a lot of different ways. And of course, we have a ton of them that express themselves at work. There is an other person factor that matters here, because often we get tuned into our boundary by the emotions that come up when someone crosses one, right? It's like I put up that fence. I may or may not even know I have it there.
Right.
And when someone crosses it, you feel some sort of way. It can be anger, it can be overwhelm, it could be resentment, it can be hurt. There's a lot of things that can happen. Usually at work, it's because of an ask. Someone asks you to do something, you start feeling some way, and then we have something to think about here.
I totally know that feeling some way. Generally, a lot of common ones at work have to do with that work-life balance. They could also do with how work gets assigned across you and your peers. Can also deal with recognition for that work or even how much you share personally. For me, I always know it's a feeling I recognize. And one time I recognized it was coming up because I was asking for stuff for my team, due on Friday, and they would send it to me late in the day on Friday. And I would get this little twinge of like, how dare they? Because now I have work to do this weekend. Right. And I was able to, recognize that feeling of resentment against them. And I could then, of course, take action on that.
Yeah, yeah. It's so easy to feel irritated. And it's a boundary, or it could just be a need in that moment. And so this sort of frequency thing matters, right? If
Mhm.
it comes up over and over and over again, and you start having this story in your head about all the different slights in the past, now we know we're actually somewhere where that behavior of another person is crossing that line, and there probably is a boundary there. The other place that boundaries sometimes happen is if our irritation factor is very, very high. So
Mm.
it may be happening infrequently, but it happens in a way that it's just such a big deal that I actually have to do something with it. And that feels a little bit more like my value system might be being triggered rather than my preferences and work style. Either one of those can be a boundary situation, but the first thing you need to do is just pause, check in with yourself, understand what your real need is, and whether that's being met or not. In your example, that Friday thing can be a work life balance thing. I want my weekend to go talk to my family and spend
Mhm.
time completely unplugged and not even thinking about what's happening at the office. Or it could be about like that Friday thing always means I have to work on the weekend because we're turning it around on Monday, and it's about the pace of work. And my
Mhm.
boundary is around pace. And so I might need to change the way I'm working so that I take the weekend out of the equation. And I like the 5 whys technique for
Mhm.
figuring out what your real need is. Why am I irritated right now? Why is this pattern bothering me? What's really underneath it? And if I could wave a magic wand to fix it, what would I wish for? That can be really helpful to understanding, is it a boundary or not? And what is the boundary?
And yeah, because I want to say two things. One is like not everything that irritates you is a boundary, right? Because
Sure.
that's but even if there is a real need under there, there's one more important test that you have to give. Just because you have a need, you have to say, like, is this a boundary that I can really stand up at work, and your role at work plays an incredibly important part about this. Your role dictates your reality. If you're your boss's, right-hand person, yeah, you're going to be getting that last minute ask on a Friday, or you're going to be asked to save the day because you're their right hand. If you're the CFO of a company that's struggling financially, well, then you might not be able to take that long-standing vacation, right at the end of the quarter. Your role is going to be what you're being paid to do in this company is really going to inform what you're able to stand up as a boundary or not.
Absolutely. And I do think that for knowledge workers, this is particularly true throughout their entire career. And the more senior you get in your organization or in your department, so C-suite leaders, senior leaders, and even just heads of departments have the visibility and the modeling factor. So there is I might be able to because I have the authority to do it in my role, but what am I trying to model and what is visible in the organization? And does my boundary match the visibility need or the modeling need? And so that's another complexity to think about in the work-life view of this. Of course, there are things that are hard nosed, illegal behavior, unethical behavior, things that are harmful to employees or customers or the organization. These are all hard nosed. And we might have to really think about how do we make sure our boundaries are met. If that one of those things that's happening, that's like, you go take action right away. Otherwise, we can actually do a little bit of thinking about our boundaries.
Yeah, because the more that you can be flexible about how your needs get met, the better off you're going to be. And once you sort of understand what your needs are, you want to show them and tell people and model them. You can't have thousands of them, right? But be selective, prioritize the ones that are most important to you. And then you actually have to let other people know what they are. It's not a boundary if you don't share it. And I also think it's incredibly important that you model that boundary as well. It can't just be something you say and then you do the opposite of.
That's right. That sends a very mixed signal and it makes it really murky. The other thing that we know about boundaries is they're fluid. They change over time. So our family time from 5 to 7 in the evening might be really important when our children are young and we need to be with them during that period of time, or we don't want to miss the game or whatever. And then our kids graduate, they go to college, we're in a different phase of our career. We may not have that same boundary, or it may not be as critical to us anymore. How do we renegotiate that and signal it? So there is the signaling, and then there is the behaving in alignment with your own boundaries so that you don't accidentally confuse people.
Yeah, because it's like if you're making it murky, it's going to be murky for everybody else.
Absolutely. So we'll come back next time in our next video. We'll talk about, okay, you've got a boundary, you've prioritized them, you're signaling correctly, but it's still being crossed. Now what do you do? So look for our next video where we talk about that.
See you next time.